Yo, welcome to the channel, everybody. I am Brian Lee Durfee, author of The Forgetting Moon and The Blackest Heart, both books published by Simon & Schuster's Saga Press. Today we're going to be reviewing LISEY'S story by Stephen King. Now, I got two different versions here. We got the hardcover, the original first edition hardcover that I bought when it came out, and then a trade paperback version. Book came out in 2006. If you've been following my channel, you know that I've been reviewing every Stephen King novel in order of publication. We are already, like, in 2 years. It's taken me 2 years, but I've got to LISEY'S story, the year 2006, so we have read the majority of the Stephen King books on this channel and reviewed them in the last 2 years. We've got about a quarter of the books left to go. Now, we always review the covers first because, you know, I love graphic design and cover illustration. So let's take a look at the original first edition hardcover. It's got this red cover with a shovel. Now, if you open it up, you can see that the book has this crazy artwork covering it. It's just a bunch of flowers and stuff. All right, well, that's cool. That's cool. I mean, but you cover it with this bright red cover, so it's really sort of, the point is moot. The book is set really nicely together. I mean, it's a great looking book. Now let's look at the paperback cover. I'll be honest, and I don't do this very often. I usually prefer the hardcover versions to the paperbacks, but I actually find the paperback cover more intriguing. I don't know why, it sits better with me. I just like the feel of it. Anyway, enough with the covers. Let's talk about the book. I listened to the Audible.com version of this book as I read along word for word with the book. The book was narrated by the actress Mare Winningham. She did a great job. I listened to the whole thing with her voice, reading along. Took me about 2.5, 3 days. Loved every minute of it. I remember when this book came out and I read it, I was just kind of like, not one of my favorites. Not one of my favorites. This is the second time I've read this book, and my opinion of it skyrocketed with the second reading. That happens once in a while. There's some Stephen King books that I loved the first time, and then the second time I read them, I just kind of like, This is one of those where it's just kind of like, the first time. Loved it the second time. Stephen King himself even admits that it's one of his most personal works and one of his most favorite books he's written to this day. And I can see why. It's very, this book is very literary. This isn't like your typical Stephen King monster Cujo comes out of the woods and tears everyone apart type horror novels. This isn't like gross and gruesome. This is more subtle along the lines of like Bag of Bones. It's more of a ghost story, but a literary ghost story. It's very Pat Conroy-esque in its writing. If you know, Pat Conroy wrote, you know, Prince of Tides and Lords of Discipline and The Great Santini. Actually, I would more compare it to John Irving. If you've read John Irving's works, you know, he's a very literary writer with the Cider House Rules, or the Hotel New Hampshire, or any number of those books. Just very literary. This Stephen King novel really feels like that to me. Like Stephen King was angling for that in this book. And he hit it. He hit it. He hit the mark. He hit all the points. It starts out with LISEY Derbyshire. LISEY, it's LISEY. It's pronounced like it rhymes with Cece. LISEY'S story starts out with her husband is dead. She's been married for 25 years to this very famous author, and he's died. And now she's going through all of his old stuff and sort of remembering their life together and the weirdness of their life together. One of the first things that struck me is Lisey is sort of jealous of her husband in that everywhere they would go, the conversation would swirl around her husband because he was the famous author. He wrote the famous books. People would just talk to him, and she would just sort of stand in the background. I can relate to this in a weird sort of way. One of the reasons I think my first marriage broke up was because back when I was getting in college and out of college, I was a very semi-famous artist. I was doing paintings for Dungeons and Dragons and Magic the Gathering. Everywhere we'd go, my paintings would be there. People would just talk to me about my artwork. My ex-wife did not like that. She didn't like it. She was much like Lisey. I was like reading into this story, sort of my own personal history with my first marriage, where my ex-wife literally was like, I hate that everywhere we go, the attention is focused on you. Nobody pays attention to me because you're the great artist. You're the great, all your artwork is spectacular and people praise you up and down and they want to talk to you nonstop about your art. And she's like, I just sit there like with nothing to say. I felt Lisey's pain, or at least my ex-wife would feel Lisey's pain because my ex-wife talked to me about that. She's like, I wish you wouldn't paint at all. I wish we could just be normal. I didn't know how to react to that other than we're not married anymore. I don't know what to say. Things happen, I'm not here. This is not my therapy section. We're talking about this. Then we're talking about this. But I really related to this from the dead husband's perspective, as odd as that is, as weird as that is. Anyway, we could go down a rabbit hole. Folks. But let's talk about the author. He was this famous author. He was a weird guy. He saw things. He saw visions and had images in his head, and he wasn't like quite right. And his wife sort of sensed that in him. And then as she's going through all of these things that used to be his, we get a sense of how this relationship really was. Was it the perfect marriage that everybody thought it was? She's got these two sisters that are a little bit crazy, Manda and Darla. And now Manda and Darla are kind of going through all of the memorabilia with Lisey. And they start to remember when he was shot. He was shot by a fan. Her husband was shot by a fan at one point, and oh my gosh, just reading that scene alone, the detail, the page and page. I mean, it's just a shooting, but Stephen King goes into page after page of detail of how that shooting just plays out and how everybody's perspective of the shooting and how everyone felt during it and what they were doing and seeing and the tunnel vision they had and how they were trying to catch the shooter but also help the victim. And it was just such a riveting scene, and only a scene that Stephen King could write. It was just absolutely brilliant. And it comes right early in the book too, so I'm not spoiling anything. But I just absolutely loved it. And I loved the way that her Darla and Manda were these just sort of crazy older sisters that just couldn't get their shit together either. And there was a lot of family drama, and but ultimately, it's just kind of like the story enters into, I guess, the dark dreams of a loved one and how you can save, or how you try to attempt to save those people. It really reminded me not only of John Irving and Pat Conroy, but it reminded me of that movie, What Dreams May Come. If you remember that, it's kind of got that tone to it where Lisey is trying to reach out into her dead husband's psyche and pull him from the darkness back into the light, kind of the theme. That's the theme, along with creativity, how creativity just fucks with a person's head. It's about themes of madness and love, of course. So it's got a lot of stuff packed into it. I can really see why Stephen King wrote this. And maybe he wrote it because it's similar to what I experienced as a young creative person when I was getting a lot of fame and adulation, and the people around me were sort of just background accessories. I guess that's the way, I mean, and that's kind of the way Lisey was feeling throughout her husband's career. But at the same time, she knew the man. She knew the man, and she knew the darkness in him. And she knew that all the adulation that people throw his way might not be oftentimes completely warranted. So I just thought this said a lot about, you know, it's a ghost story overall. I mean, it's kind of like Bag of Bones, which is another Stephen King book. I think I mentioned that. So anyway, I absolutely loved this along the second time I read it. I really dug it. Really dug it. And I really liked Mare Winningham's performance on Audible. And so I'm going to give this, gosh, if I would have rated this when I first read it, it would be about a 6 out of 10. I'm going to bump that up to a solid 9.0 out of 10. That's how much I loved rereading this.